All right, welcome everybody to our short-term rental program. Lots of real estate agents over the last couple of years have been jumping into the short-term rental business or Airbnb business. That is buying different types of real estate and doing basically a short-term rental. So we've got so many requests that came through from real estate agents saying, what does it take to get into short-term rentals? What do I have to watch out for? What are the potential obstacles? So today we have with us two real estate agents who are at different stages of their careers in building Airbnb and short-term rental businesses. So throughout today's program, if you're on the live program, feel free to type in questions within the chat box or the Q&A, and we'll take questions throughout the program. But we're going to dig right in. Let's start with Dave Menapace. Dave, tell us a little bit about your real estate career and your short-term rental background.
Awesome. Thanks, Stacy. Hello, everyone. So yeah, I'm Dave Menapace. Real estate. I bought my first house 7 years ago, and I never wanted to do it again, ever again. It terrified me. It felt so invasive with everything that it was brutal. And here I am doing real estate full time, and I'm super happy about it. So what made things better? Well, we bought our first Airbnb in 2019. It was actually 2 months before my son was born, which is a great time to buy a project like that. But for us, it was really simple. We had no ambition of starting a business out of it. We just wanted to buy an affordable house in Cape Cod that we could have a free vacation at and rent out when we weren't using it to cover the expenses. And that's exactly what we did. We enjoyed the process. We got it up and running, and we found that we were really passionate about it pretty quickly. Getting a 5-star review and giving somebody a really good vacation was very, very satisfying for us. So we continued to do that for a couple more years. And about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we pivoted a little bit, bought some out-of-state properties down in Tennessee. Those were long-term rentals. And then we decided that we really, really wanted to buy another vacation rental. So we leveraged the equity in the Cape house, and we bought a really fantastic house off market right near Sunday River up in Northwest Maine. And that's a much bigger house. It sleeps 12 people, but we're able to really leverage our systems from Cape Cod, apply them to Maine. As we were doing that, I ended up going into being a real estate agent full time. And what I didn't realize is that my background in short-term rentals would end up being my strength, especially as a new agent. So I represented lots of different buyers that wanted to buy a house as a short-term rental. And then that sort of snowballed into me starting actually a management business. So outside of the 2 short-term rentals that my wife and I own, we now manage, I think it's 6 others, and we're bringing 4 others online before the end of next year. So we do a lot of consulting, we run a podcast, we do coaching, and we do this management business now. And it's really been fantastic. And there's a whole bunch that we can dive into throughout this presentation, but I'll stop it right there and pass
All
the
right,
mic.
great stuff. We also have with us Sarah Lewis, also a successful real estate agent who has been building her own little Airbnb business. So welcome, Sarah. Tell us a little bit about your background in real estate and then in short-term rentals.
Thank you, Stacy. I love listening to Dave's story because I feel like it's somewhat similar to mine. I bought my first house in 2014. It was a long-term rental property, a duplex. I didn't hate it. I loved it. My first purchase is what inspired me to then get my real estate license pretty much right after that. So I loved being property manager. I loved having that income property. And then in 2018, I bought my first Airbnb property. Now, this one was purchased really with the intention of being a vacation property for my family. We go to Maine every single summer, so we bought a house on Sebago Lake, and we thought, okay, we'll just rent it a little bit on Airbnb to supplement the income and pretty much just wanted to cover the mortgage, until I realized just how profitable that could be. So now it's really a stream of income for my entire family. We bought it with my parents. And then we have picked up another long-term rental, but are actively on the hunt for another short-term rental. I do manage my own properties. I don't manage anybody else's yet, but that's probably a progression I can see my career path taking, like Dave's is getting to manage other people's, because you really do get into a rhythm and a system. And once you figure out the easiest way to scale these things, it just becomes easy. So it gets easier as you go.
All right, good stuff. Sarah, how do you finance one of these properties? Is it a second home financing or investor financing?
I think it depends on what your goals are. So my goal has always been keep as much cash as I can in my own bank account so that I can acquire more property. Because of that, I purchase these properties with minimal down. So the first Airbnb I bought was a 10% down vacation home, which you can do as long as it's rented for less than 6 months out of the year. And I put it in my own name. If I had wanted to LLC it right away, I would have had to do a 20 to 25% down commercial loan. With my property, what I did is I purchased it at the 10% vacation second home loan with a residential loan, and then waited till the property had accumulated enough equity to refinance and then put it into a commercial loan. So basically got my free 20% down just using the equity in the property.
Okay. And then Dave, anything you want to add to that as far as financing goes?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite way for financing these things is doing 10% down. With that, because when you buy one of these houses, I mean, depending on where they're located and what the market's like, but you're going to be spending a decent amount on furnishing it and getting it ready. And you are going to be having a high yield asset if you've bought it correctly. So again, like same, I like doing the 10% down. I have bought houses that are going to be turned into midterm rentals soon using hard money, but that's like a totally different sequencing. Unless you're going to be buying a house that you're going to be actively doing construction on. And that's part of a bigger strategy. I typically recommend doing 10% down if the numbers still work with where rates are and everything like that.
And one thing I wanted to point out, I don't know if you did this, Dave, but Sarah, you mentioned you bought with family. You guys look for different ways, especially for a first one. I think there's a lot of agents who want to get into this, but that first one might be like kind of scary to go out on your own. Dave, have you done them with any family members or anybody else?
Just long-term rentals where I've brought partners in. Everything we've kept in-house, and meaning my wife and I saved up and paid for it. A lot of that was just because I'm a bit more conservative. I have a really high risk tolerance, but not with other people's money. So I've done it on other types of properties, but an Airbnb is so dependent on the operator, whether it's you or a property manager or somebody else. And if you don't have a ton of experience yet, like now I would, that I've managed a handful of these, but starting out, personally, I like to stay within my comfort zone.
Okay. And then how about you, Sarah? You mentioned you did one with your parents. Is that something that you look to do a partnership with somebody, or is the goal that you might do one with a family member, for example, and then eventually just start building them on your own?
Yeah, I think I would absolutely partner with people simply to increase the buying power. The nice thing about the way my property is set up now is even though my parents technically own 40% of the property, the LLC pays me out a management fee every single month. So it's like I get the income of the rental income, like so the proceeds of it, but then I also receive a management fee for my services because I do completely self-manage that property. So I would 100% take people's investment and then say, listen, I'm going to management. Here's my management fee. You just bring in the investment and I'll tell you how to run it. And you basically get the consulting for free. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do. You're just providing income down payment towards that property.
So a question I have for you, Sarah, is I do not own any short-term rentals, but I have long-term rentals. And on every holiday, you name it, Christmas, something breaks on every holiday. And then it's like a flood of phone calls. And then during the holidays, especially, I hate those properties. I'm like, why do I do this to myself? I would imagine that would be my greatest fear, I think, of going into a short-term rental. Do you get crazy calls in the middle of the night all of a sudden that something's not working?
All hours. It's an all-hour job, but so is real estate. So it's just, it only increases my demand a little bit for my time. We actually block most major holidays from our property because we've found things like, as you can imagine, St. Patrick's Day, Halloween, Christmas and New Year's. One of the questions you had for us later was, how do you prevent parties? Don't rent during those holiday seasons. Thanksgiving is a wonderful holiday. I love renting for Thanksgiving. It's all families, but those other holidays, try not to rent. The key there is having your team of people on call. My property is 2.5 hours away, but I have this guy named Kevin that for $75 a pop, he'll go out whenever I need him to. So it's, having somebody available, but you're on your phone 24/7, but all of us real estate agents are.
Gotcha. How about you, Dave? Do you have any crazy calls all of a sudden on Christmas Day? Somebody's in one of your buildings, or do you block off holidays?
So we don't block off holidays. It's just so happened that we've always used our properties on the major holidays, but that is about to change now that we can't be at every property at every holiday. But we do a fair amount of screening on the front end. So there's a couple different things that you can do. Like we're super big on communication. So just like parties aside from it, like how to just understand and be proactive about things. We sign up for every proactive service you possibly could think of, from pest control to the furnace to, hot water heater inspection. So we pay for those things annually. And even at one property up in Maine, we get, like, that's on a septic tank, we get that pump twice a year because we're just like, you know what, that house sleeps 12 people, more things can break. We do like 5 or 6 automated messages to guests from, right when we confirm a booking to 3 days before they check in, the day they check in, the day after they check in, and the day before they check out, and then on checkout day. And those are all just like automated things. I use a property management software now, but you can set those up in Airbnb and Vrbo. And what you find is that when you're sort of like actively asking how things are going and what's going on, you get way fewer surprises. In those messages, especially at the beginning when people are sending us inquiries, we just tell them off the bat, this is like a no party house. And Airbnb is really cracking down on guests that like throw a party at a house, because obviously there's a lot more regulations around short-term rentals. So we're just very, very proactive on the front end, and it's not too bad. Like, I don't get messages every single day anymore once we really started increasing our sort of communication activity. And then we are at the point now that we're actually going to be hiring an assistant, and we're going to have them work from noon to 8 p.m. because we have found that's when the majority of the messages come in. So if anyone's listening that has a bunch of properties and they're tied to their phone, that might be something. And then of course you have like your team, like handyman, hot tub, plumber, electrician, cleaners, you name it.
Yeah. The other thing I'd like to add to that is the use of smart technology. So they now have a gauge on your furnace or your boiler that will tell you exactly where your oil level is at. So you can check it from anywhere. And then you have your smart fire alarms, you have your smart doorbells. We have cameras pointed at our driveways and our door for every single property. We have a gauge on our propane tank. We have a water alarm that is connected to an app. So if if our fridge or if our washing machine floods. So all of those things can also, with communication with the guest, can help increase your risk because you're always monitoring.
That's a great point. Dave, one thing that's interesting about your business is the fact that you live in Massachusetts and now you're buying in other states. Super curious as to how do you mitigate risk going into an area that you really don't know? How do you evaluate a property?
Well, there's a few different ways, right? Because there's like the what am I going to make is one evaluation, right? And then what's it going to cost for me to make that is sort of the other. And then there's also the market factors. So I mean, all three of those things play a key role, right? A lot of times what I actually do though is I throw all the technology aside and I make a few really simple phone calls to decide if this is even going to be worth my time. Usually the first person I'm going to call are established vacation property managers in the area. So when I bought in Bethel, Maine, I just Googled it. I said, vacation property manager. And my wife and I talked to three of them, and we had a list of not like an exhaustive list, but 4 or 5 big questions. Like, what are the high and low seasons? What do you expect to make? We knew we wanted a house that could sleep 12 people because of some of the revenue analysis we had done. But we just said, how much can a house like this make? What are the top amenities? We're like, okay, we need a view and we need a hot tub. Those seem to be the two things that are really selling these places. So we just get a sense of like what it's going to take. So I call a few property managers, I call a few cleaning companies. I ask them, like, what does it cost to clean a house like this? As a cleaner, what are things you like and don't like in a house, right? I'm already trying to establish a relationship with them because they're my eyes and ears. And like one pro tip is for every house I get, whether I'm managing it for somebody or it's mine, I walk the house with the cleaner and I say to them, tell me every single thing you hate in here. And it throws them off, but they're so happy to receive that question. And I sometimes do have to put something in there that they hate, but at least they don't hate it as much because I've acknowledged that it's a pain in their butt. So property managers, cleaners, and then the city. I call the city or the town and I just ask them, like, what is there a permitting process? Have there been issues in the past? I specifically target really high volume vacation destinations. I typically stay out of cities because I know, like for Cape Cod, for example, Cape Cod has a lot to lose if they were to ban short-term rentals. An entire industry has been built off of that for over 100 years. I know it's not going anywhere. Same with up in Maine. Sunday River is the biggest ski resort in terms of volume and visitors in that entire part of the country. What do you think happens if they stop getting the tax money from those Airbnbs? There's 320 Airbnbs in Bethel and Newry, right? Like that's over $3 million. So I try and target areas that has a lot to lose if they were to let go of short-term rentals altogether. And I don't mind having some restrictions, but those are like the safeguards that I put in place. And then I use some different tools, like online tools, to figure out like what can I actually make for revenue if I'm really performing well.
So is Tennessee a vacation destination?
No, so Tennessee was, so all my houses there in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I do have one in northern Georgia, Rossville, Georgia. I was sometimes we don't always stay like on the path that we say we're going to stay on. So a few years ago, I was just sort of bored not being able to find another house in Cape Cod when really I should have just looked off market. And I decided to try my hand at doing out-of-state BRRRRs. So anyone listening, that's buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. And it was an amazing experience. I bought 6 houses that year doing that strategy, but those were all long-term rentals. I considered doing short-term rentals. And then of course, now there's a short-term rental moratorium. All your rentals have to be 30 days or more. But that was more of like a 5-year play. How can I throw $100,000 into something, let it sit for 5 years and then sell it all to really go back into short-term rentals? And now it'll be 3 years.
Interesting. And then Sarah, how about you? How are you evaluating your next opportunity?
I think one of the tools Dave was kind of alluding to was AirDNA. You've probably heard of it. It's basically an evaluation tool online where they take rental data from these websites, Vrbo, Airbnb, and they resell it to you. So you go on and you subscribe to a zip code and you're able to see the data for that town. So if you're considering a property, especially out of state where you don't know the market, I have some interest right now in the Myrtle Beach area. You can go on, you can take a look at that area, see how they're performing. Dave has reached out to property managers. I've actually reached out to other Airbnb owners. I find them on their listing website. And if it's a similar area, but maybe not like a direct competitor to the property I'm looking at, so that I want them to be honest with me, I'll reach right out to them and ask them, how are they performing? What's the seasonality? What do I need to know about the area? And for the most part, I found people are pretty honest. You know, I'm nothing to them. I'm just a friendly bystander asking them some questions. And if somebody reached out to me, I'd be perfectly honest with them as well. They're not my competition yet.
That's
Interesting.
a super, super good point. And just to add on to what Sarah said in support of it, another tool people can check out. So AirDNA is fantastic. I recommend AirDNA if you've like really honed in on an area. So like Sarah's like Myrtle Beach, great, because it is by zip code. So it's, you pay for a zip code. It's like $40 per zip code. If you want access to the entire country though, it's something like $1,000 a month. So there is a competing tool that doesn't go as deep as AirDNA. I like to use them in conjunction, but it's called STR Insights. It's just strinsights.com. I met the CEO at a short-term rental conference. His name's Kenny Bedwell. And this has been really fantastic because I think it's 150 or 200 a month, but for the entire country. And it's sort of a combination of Zillow and AirDNA mixed together. So it'll sort of tell you, you can see what number of bedrooms seem to be performing the best. So, okay, I'm going to focus on a 4-bedroom up in Bethel, where in another market, like I was looking at Newport the other day, Newport, Rhode Island, I said, man, I could make what I want to make with just a 2-bedroom. It doesn't, the price, the ROI on a 4-bedroom in Rhode Island, in Newport, it's so much, the cost of the house is so much higher, but the returns aren't there. I'm going to go with the 2-bedroom condo. So that is another really good one. And I have a couple of YouTubes on how I've used it as an agent to make sales. And that's been really cool too.
And then Sarah, so Dave said that there's some protection going into an area that has a lot of vacation renters, that the town's never going to get rid of short-term rentals because the town makes too much from it. But I will say I've seen towns, like especially out in the Seacoast area in New Hampshire, there are these vacation destination towns that are really trying to crack down. I think Conway, New Hampshire is another one that they're trying to stop short-term rentals. Sarah, what are you doing to protect yourself from that?
I'm avoiding those areas. You know, North Conway and even Madison has some amazing potential for vacation rental properties, but they are in the middle of these debates between full-time residents and then the short-term vacation rentals. If you're not in a commercial or mixed-use zone, they're saying you cannot operate and rent out your short-term rental property. So for me, I'm high risk, I think, but not that high risk where I want to go into a market that is in flux. Maine is amazing. I feel like the whole state of Maine, because they're enjoying this income revenue stream from the short-term rentals. They have a lot to be gained by the vacation market. They're a vacation state. So just pinpointing these areas that do not have some sort of legislation battle going on right now. I've just shifted my focus. Sure. Did I want North Conway? Absolutely. But there's the other side of the state, Thornton, Waterville, Loon area, that is not having these ongoing battles and rather is supporting short-term vacation rentals that is just as profitable and just as attractive to people for traveling in New Hampshire.
It's funny you bring up North Conway, because same, that was our, after Cape Cod, we really enjoy that area. But there is and I learned this when I was in Miami, actually, from the CEO of STR Insights. In a place like, I'll use Chattanooga or like Salem, actually Salem, Massachusetts is a good example, where they allow short-term rentals, but since 2019, they are not issuing any new permits. So if you had a permit before, they'll continue to let you renew it. One strategy, and this is really unique, and I actually know a few people now that have done this, is if the house is in an LLC, you as the buyer can buy the company, you can buy the LLC, and the permit comes along with it. And then you can continue to operate it. Your financing is going to be different. Like, you're not going to be able to do 10% down, so to speak. But if you if you're in the know and you understand how that's working and you have a good agent that understands that whole side of the business as well, because I don't know how that works honestly with commissions when it's a sale of a business, not of a property, but there are ways you can do it. Not smart for your first one. It's sort of like if you really like an area and you see a golden opportunity.
Dave, who do you call like at the town? So I'm going into a new town. Who would I call at the town to just find out what the rules are for Airbnbs?
It's usually the Board of Health. So usually what I'll do, because I literally just had this discussion with the town of Salem last week, or might have been even earlier this week. So I just usually call the main line and I let them know, hey, I'd love to, buy a short-term rental in this area. I'm trying to get an understanding of the ordinances. They'll always be on the town website, but I also like just clarification of them. And almost always they then transfer me to Board of Health, because they're the ones, if there is a permitting system and they do in-person inspections, it's always the Board of Health that's gonna come out. So building department or Board of Health.
And then I'm curious, for a short time at our real estate brokerage, we had a short-term rental division that did summer rentals. And a few years ago, all the rules changed on it to the point that we had to submit every time we collected any rental income, we had to file like a state tax form and submit it. And it became too much that we basically don't have that. Do you have that in any areas, that there's extra tax repercussions that you have to file more?
I think having a good accountant is the best investment you can make.
We do file taxes monthly for all of our short-term rentals. It ends up just being a $0 submission, because Airbnb and Vrbo, just as of a couple of years ago, I think it was 2000 summer, I think it was like July of 19. I specifically remember that for some reason, was when they started submitting. But before that, no. And you would have to like go on there, do the calculations. It was pretty brutal. But we haven't had any issues with it since then, since that summer of 19.
Yeah, so you'll get an annual report from Airbnb and Vrbo with what they've paid for taxes. But similar to Dave, I pay on a quarterly basis instead of monthly, but into the state.
So Airbnb does a big piece of that for you. I'm curious for you guys. I mean, the market has shifted significantly in general over the last few months. I'm curious if that affects your thoughts. So Sarah, are you still super excited, gung-ho to go buy your next property, or are you easing off a little bit?
Any real estate investor can't wait for prices to stall and drop. So I'm getting jitters. Yeah, I'm excited. I want to be able to scoop up as much property as I can. As far as the, buy, like I'm ready to buy. The impact to the vacation home rentals, and I don't know how Dave feels, but the trend of staying at an Airbnb has just continued to go up and up and up. And I think COVID helped that dramatically. And now that people are feeling a little bit more comfortable traveling, I haven't seen a stall locally to that system. I expected to see, okay, people are going more international and staying less locally, but it hasn't happened yet.
How about you, Dave? For the time being, are you going to buy right away your next one? Or are you going to hold off, wait and see what the market does?
Because I'm never flipping houses, at least not on purpose, I have no problem buying no matter what's happening in the market, because I know that I have, in Tennessee, those are 5-year holds, but my long-term rentals, like I'm not going to sell those things, at least for a very, very long time. When we talk about market though, also now I haven't experienced this, but what I have noticed is that there's a ton more competition out there. Like there's just a lot more short-term rentals to compete with. And there are lots and lots of folks that maybe did really well in 2020 and 2021. And then all of a sudden they're hardly getting any bookings. And there's a few reasons for that. And that can literally be a whole nother presentation. But like at the very high level, houses that are performing in like the top 20%, meaning that they have the highest occupancy and they're making the most money, those are going to continue to do really well. Houses that are sort of in that like 50 to 80%, those are a lot of the ones where folks are just not getting people through the door. So why is that? A lot of it does come down to their listing and like having professional photos, having a really amazing like description, getting repeat customers because you have an amazing like welcome guide and good communication, and you have quality things. Like short-term rentals, no more are they like, hey, just, you can get stuff for very cheap, but you do have to make sure the quality of it is really good. And so what I've started to really come to notice is that luxury and sort of more expensive vacation rentals are continuing to climb and do really well. Houses that are more budget friendly, my Cape Cod is a perfect example of that. You make it as nice as possible and price it competitively, you're going to continue to do well. If you're sort of middle of the road and you haven't decided which direction you're going to go, those are the ones that people typically find like it's just not worth their time. Either they want to grab people and go more expensive, or they want to go on like a cheaper kind of couples getaway. So a totally different presentation that we could spend like an hour or two on, but there are ways. If you're having low volume of bookings, there are some ways to be able to break through that and get back up into a higher performing property.
Do you guys find, Sarah, we'll start with you. Do you find that there's less market fluctuation in a vacation rental town because of the vacation rentals?
I can really only speak to my, my own market. And I have been surprised to find that it really is a full year-round market. So we're up in Naples, Maine, and we have strong rentals throughout the winter as well as the summer. As far as fluctuation, again, with COVID, I've only seen things go up and up and up and up and up. And I think to Dave's point, we've really focused on that luxury rental, having a differentiating factor, which for us is the waterfront, and the home is a chalet style with just a huge wall of windows and a 2-level living room. So people are and we have professional photos. Thank you, Tom Vargeletis. We have, that wow factor that brings people in, and I haven't been hurt by any market fluctuation. And I think people traveling now are more likely to book an Airbnb than any other type of stay. So if anything, it's continued to go up. We haven't found our ceiling. Every single year, we take 20% of our profit and reinvest it into the property, so that every single year we're adding something. We put in a new dock, we put on a new deck, we've added AC, we've done a new ping pong table, we're looking into a hot tub. We keep refreshing and refreshing and refreshing, and we have renters that have come back every single year.
But what about prices? So you're out looking for another property. Are you seeing prices for a property that could be an Airbnb? Are you seeing those come down a little bit, or they're staying strong?
I think that, yeah, the demand for this, getting into this kind of business, first of all, there's companies that are doing this on such a huge scale that an individual buyer like myself is now competing with these investment companies that can go and pick up 5 per year. And their price sensitivity to purchase one of these properties is much lower than mine. So they have much more cash, much more a stronger investment that they can make. So I do think the barrier for entry in certain markets is much higher now than it ever used to be, because people are having so much success with this Airbnb model. And that's why, for me in particular, I'm starting to shy away from some of these towns where it's just oversaturated. A perfect example is my property. When I bought it in 2018 was a $400,000 property. I could probably sell it for 1.5 million now. I could not afford it and be profitable if I were to buy it now, but buying it in 2018, yeah, it was a steal. So yeah, just finding a market that has not gone gangbusters and is not priced out. Like you still have to be profitable at the end of the day, especially when we're talking about our 10% down.
Yeah, what are you
strategy.
seeing, Dave? Like in Cape Cod, it seems like everything is just so expensive right now.
So you'd think that, but we found like, so in the last 3 months, there was two specific houses that I was the buyer agent for, and they were absolute steals. And so one of them, I'm in Dennisport, by the way, Dennisport, Cape Cod, within like a 5-minute walk of the beach. And in my neighborhood, a house came on. Actually, let me take a step back. You have to know what people want in that market. In Cape Cod, I saw through that tool STR Insights, and no, I don't work for them, so I get nothing by saying that. But I saw that a 4-bedroom house could make 150K, while a 3-bedroom house was around 107, and a 2-bedroom house was around like 45K. And I know those numbers are right because I know people that own in that neighborhood that are making that amount. So this first house that I'll share with you, the reason it was such a good deal is it was only a 3-bedroom house, but it had 4 bedrooms. What does
Hmm.
that tell you, right? So they ended up buying that. It was listed at 550, and I told them, you buy this at 650, it's a steal, because any 4-bedroom house in this neighborhood selling for 800.
Hmm.
So we ended up getting that one for 580. I'm going to be managing it for them. They're about ready to launch in a few weeks. The next house was a 2-bedroom, but it had a 3-bedroom septic. So, it was sold as a 2-bedroom. The guy that bought it owns a construction company. He's going to put a second level on the house, and now his income's going from 45K to 107,000.
Hmm.
So it's like, as an investor, you always have to think about where your value add opportunities are. And if you don't see any value add opportunities, especially in this market, then it's best to move on. And the one other thing I'll share is you don't have to compete on market. So we bought 8 houses in the last 18 months, and none of them were on market.
Hmm.
Some of them were through wholesalers, which is a totally different topic. But that house in Maine near Sunday River, it was listed at the end of 2019. We just had a kid, just bought the Cape house. No way we were buying it, but we loved the house and I just kept it saved. And once a year, I'd kind of look at it. Well, about a year ago, I figured out who the new owners were, and I sent them an email. And this was the case for about 3 or 4 others in that market. And I just said, hey, I'm Dave. I'd love to buy. I gave more than that, but a little picture of the family and everything. And I sent them an email and just said, look, if you ever want to sell this house, I'd love to give you a competitive offer. A week later, they emailed us back and said, that would be great. That would be fantastic. Yeah, let's talk about this. So we ended up getting what probably would have been a $500,000 house for about 420. They offered it to us for 420. We countered at 430. Sounds weird, right? Well, they covered the closing costs, so it was less cash out of pocket. And then we threw in a vacation for them in Cape Cod, which they really enjoyed too. And so we made the deal happen that way. So we didn't have any competition. So there's lots of strategic ways, especially right now. What I'm finding is people that bought houses in 18, 19, or 20 might be a little worried. Maybe they're not using the house as much as they thought. Maybe somebody lost a job. And those types of people can be great for either you stepping in and asking if they want you to manage it as a short-term rental so you can be a co-host for them, or maybe they'd be interested in selling it to you.
So we have lots of questions coming through about the cost involved. So
yeah.
What are the costs, for example, Airbnb or any of the platforms you're using, as well as management fees, et cetera?
Do you want to go first, Sarah? Or you want me to take it?
Well, since you're already a property manager, you can take it. I did reply to
Sure,
that
yeah.
in the chat.
Oh, nice. So the fees from Airbnb and VRBO, which are your 2 big ones, are 3%. Like the guest gets charged 3%, you get charged 3%. Taking a couple steps back, just like if you have an empty house that you're looking to get up and running, I find that a good rule of thumb to buy quality like furniture and things to put in there is usually going to be right around like $8,000 per bedroom. Not meaning $8,000 into each bedroom, but if it's a 3-bedroom house, you're probably going to look at around 25K to get it up and running, just with all the furnishings and decor. So it's just like a decent rule of thumb. And then any other amenities that you add on to that. In terms of what I charge as a management fee to folks, there's sort of a few different tiers. If somebody bought the house with me as like I was their agent, then I'll usually do 15% fee. That's not off the total gross. That's just whatever the daily rate is, because there's cleaning fees and pet fees and stuff. But usually whatever the daily rate is, let's say it comes out to, $1,000 for a vacation, right? I'll take 15% of that. If they were not a client of mine as their buyer agent, I'll charge 20 and then I cap it at 20. That said, why would somebody pay me that? I take them through like the technology I use and how I give them a sales pitch, but it's true. I tell them what I do at my own properties that I own and the technology that I use to get them more revenue and what sort of my service model is for guests. And it usually gives them peace of mind. So I'd say usually 15 to 20 if you're going to outsource it. Vacasa and Evolve, they'll take 35% and a whole bunch of fees. And I've a lot of my clients that didn't buy with me found me because they were upset with those bigger companies.
You find the same estimated cost, Sarah?
Yeah, we were quoted 23% from Vacasa. We did explore going through them. I mean, the nice thing is they have everything is in-house. So they have a salaried team of cleaners, handymen, hot tub service, maintenance. And they have a linen service and everything is in-house. So it's kind of hands off. If you wanted to be, not on your phone all the time and doing a company like this, it's not a bad route to go. It's just going to eat into your profit. So the nice thing is their cleaning service, for example, will take 2 pictures of every single room at every single clean. So you can well document any damage that's happening to the property. They'll restage, they'll put out your gift baskets. It's a really manicured service. And for that, it's nice to get started. If the cleaner is the most important thing, which Dave has touched on, but they're your eyes and ears. They set up the property, they stage it, they're looking for damages for you. They are your best asset, and they're also your most expensive annual cost of running. If you've heard the 2% rule for long-term property, long-term rental, I would say it's probably double that for a short-term rental and like a 4% operating expense.
Gotcha.
I find too, just like numbers wise, usually like if I'm going to spend 500K on a house, I want to have a line of sight to be able to gross like right around 80K. Like for whatever reason, those numbers with 10% down usually end up being right around like 30% cash on cash when you get through it. So like, I don't overthink it anymore. My wife will do all the pro formas, but at the end of the day, like those are the 2 numbers. If I'm going to spend $1 million, do I have a line of sight to 160K? Maybe not in year 1, but like, can we bring it there?
By the way, Dave, somebody just asked, do you manage anywhere in the US?
I would if the opportunity arose, but right now I seem to have one at like Vermont, Maine, and Massachusetts, kind of all over Mass, but our systems are repeatable. So.
Gotcha. By the way, I didn't know if either of you have experienced this, just thinking about costs in general. I bought a lake house in 2018. I don't Airbnb it, but my taxes basically doubles. So I got notification that the valuation has literally doubled, which the real estate market has doubled too. So I can get double what I purchased it for now, but the town say, all right, we'll tax you on that. Have you guys experienced a massive change in taxes?
Cape Cod had it for sure, but it got passed off to the guest as an additional fee to them.
Okay.
And then I haven't seen that in the other houses that I have or operate.
Gotcha. what other softwares are you guys using for management? Any type of software that you're using? Dave, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I use a software called, I sort of have a few softwares that I use, but my primary hub is a software called IGMS. And it feeds all the information from Airbnb and VRBO. And I have so I do all my messaging out of there. I have like all my calendar. I actually manage the reason I got that is because it will automatically notify my cleaners, my hot tub people, and handyman. I can create tasks. So it's this whole sort of like management software. And I think the fee comes to like $30 a month per property that's on there. And then I use for managing my pricing, I use a tool called Price Labs, dynamically prices. So I'll set a minimum and a maximum and a baseline. And it's pretty awesome. Like, so Freiburg Fair is next week in Maine. If you have a house in Freiburg, it'll put the price of that house much higher that week because it's a very popular tourist week. So things like that. And then we use one other tool, but it is part of my management that I look at, is a tool called Rank Breeze. RANKBREEZE. It was really neat. I met the CEO, Kevin, at a conference, and he was kind of running me through it. But a lot of people use this tool now. It's essentially a CMA for Airbnbs. I can see, with Airbnb and VRBO, you want to be on someone types in Dennisport or Bethel, Maine, Sunday River area. You want to be on the first page, preferably in the first 10 slots, right, for any available date. That's how people find you. So I use that tool to make sure that out of the 320 listings, I'm always at the front for any of the houses I manage or that I own, because that's what helps us keep our occupancy up. So I use all of those tools in conjunction with each other.
How about you, Sarah? Any other tools that you're using?
So again, I only have the one property. So I've been tracking and managing everything through Excel to see, what percentage of my bookings are VRBO versus Airbnb. As far as welcome packets and communication, I use Canva. So I've made these welcome booklets, instruction sheets, signs for the properties. You can also buy these things off of Etsy. And then I was trying to think if there was one that Dave hasn't touched on. Nope, everything has been Excel.
Curious if either one of you have experienced Craigslist scams on your properties, that somebody's advertising the property, collecting the rent, sending people, and
I know people that's happened to, yeah, but mine hasn't been a guinea pig for that. Thank goodness.
Gotcha. Sarah, you have not?
My long-term rental properties are more a target for those, to be honest. Yeah, that's happened to me for long-term rentals. Absolutely.
Have either of you purchased a property that is already an existing Airbnb? You have, Dave. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, the Cape Cod house was, and then the house in Maine was before the prior owners had it. I never tracked down that listing, but Cape Cod definitely was. Now, we were fortunate that they blocked off their calendar because they were selling it. So we ended up, we could start blank, and it was cool. They gave us like their old login so we could get some of the information and learn how to actually set this thing up, which now we'll like consult and help people do that. There's a couple things to consider though when that happens, right? Because if somebody is booked out for an entire year and then they go to sell their house, and it's this sort of gray area between them selling a business and that account, that Airbnb account, is not easily transferable. And once you have an Airbnb or VRBO account, like the prize, the greatest prize is having that super host status, because that's how you stay on the first page and get it. So people want to continue to book with you. So typically what I tell people is that if you're going to end up buying and there's a whole bunch of bookings, really get that seller to do one of two things: to either cancel those bookings, and they can do it by reaching out and seeing if the guest will cancel, so it doesn't make them look bad, and just say there's a home sale being done. And then let them like have that person ask them to rebook through you, like in a month's time once it's ready. So that's one option. Or you can have that seller stay on as like a property manager and maybe try and work out like some fee and then take it over after them. You just always want to be careful who you're going into business with. And if they don't have something like precious to lose out of that relationship, it doesn't mean it'll always work out great for you. So those are a couple of things to think about.
The nice thing is once you earn Superhost status, any additional property that you bring on will automatically begin as a Superhost property. So it's like once your account has earned that badge, you maintain it for your new properties.
That's great.
And that's actually a recent change that Airbnb, I think, started, was it last year?
Yeah. It's really fantastic as you start to scale.
Okay, so I think for any of us that are interested in Airbnb and hesitant on it, we want to know like what's the worst case. So you guys each share with us your very worst horror story, the worst person that has come into your Airbnb and did something bad to it. So Dave, we'll start with you.
So it's really funny that you asked this. So my wife and I run a podcast. It's called Hassle Free RE. And episode 7 was, oh crap, problems in short-term rentals. And we run through this for a good like 45 minutes. There's 2 things and they're pretty big deals. And there's the same approach to overcoming them. The first is a cleaner doesn't show up. Like, right, that's the obvious one. Happens, it's gonna happen. It's part of the business. And so, so that's tough. I never give money back unless a guest asks for it. And typically with a dirty house, guests don't surprisingly ask for money back. They just either want it to be clean or just some acknowledgement that it's happened. So you just have to have, in this industry, you have to have a ton of empathy and you have to put yourself in the guest shoes every time. But that will happen. It's happened several times across different cleaners. You figure it out. Usually you have a backup cleaner and you try and do a good job of hiring the next one. The biggest thing though, like the biggest thing that's ever happened to me, and this probably didn't just happen to me, but to a lot of people, is up in Maine. That home is on the side of a mountain and we do not have a drilled well. It's a shallow well. I knew nothing about wells before buying that house, but with the weather that we had this summer, we weren't getting water to the house. And we had a party of 12. They were several families that were all related that were there, but they didn't speak English. Oh. Which is fine, but it made for some communication barriers. And, they were using the hose to fill up water balloons. There was like water balloons everywhere. People were in the showers, the water stopped working. I literally called a pool filling like company that fills pools and got them to deliver water into the well, which then broke part of the road. Like it's just like one thing after another. So, that was a real challenge though, right? Like people can live without internet. They cannot live without water. So I empathized with them. Luckily it happened on their very last day and they did leave the house really dirty. So we just came to an agreement that I wasn't going to charge them more for that. But I still had guests checking in later that day and, on and on throughout the rest of the summer. So I just incorporated that into my front end communication. I'd let people know that Maine and the rest of the world for that matter, in a serious drought situation, bring water. If you don't want to come anymore, please let me know. We'll get this, we'll get you your money back. And that really helped for the remainder of the summer. But, things happen. I've had noise complaints, people trash the house. That goes back to the quality, like buy quality stuff that's not going to break. You don't want to buy something 3 times and have to go there with a little Allen wrench for hours on it. So that's my 2 cents on that.
What do you have for your worst story?
Let's see. My house is the backdrop of a 45-minute video log that is on YouTube still. If you want to find Koala Puffs, she is a marijuana connoisseur and she can be seen smoking every type of device imaginable and giving a tutorial on how to roll the perfect blunt. with the sign for my property right in the background. Like we have this custom wood carved Chalet at Sebago Cove sign that is right in the background of this. So that was nice. She racked up about $700 worth of damages, including running around the house with sparklers, which you can see in the YouTube video. And then we've had quite a few strippers at the house. Candy and Bubbles, which could be seen entering and exiting on our Ring doorbell. So in each case, you know, Airbnb was alerted to what had happened. And the unfortunate thing is these people deactivate their account and get a new email address or just book through somebody else. So once you have an established property, you know, at first we kind of let anybody book just to get the reviews and get people in the door and get an established account. But now we really crack down. You cannot book my property if you do not have any past reviews. Sometimes it just, if I get a funny feeling about it and it's like a group of, you know, all adults, like 15 guys, I'm like, you know what? I'll take the hit on the cancellation rate because I just don't trust you people. You know, I'm really looking for the families. If you have kids, great, rent my property all day. But if you're just a bunch of like all one gender, I tend to think that's a bachelorette party, and I have no problem, you know, canceling because it's just not worth it. Or if it's a situation where I want to take the chance, I'll just charge them some additional fees for the extra head count or something like that.
Gotcha. We only have a couple more minutes, so if you guys don't mind, we have so many people that asked for contact information. So Sarah, do you mind sharing how people could get in touch with you if they had any questions?
Sure. My email address is sarah.lewis@Layer Realty. That's SARAHLEWIS @Layer Realty. I'll put it in the chat. I'll also I'll give a link to my property website so you can take a look. I was going to tell everyone we just had a cancellation for this weekend. So if anybody wants to go stay at my house super cheap, we're normally $700 a night. I'll do it $300 a night for this weekend. You can go check in right now.
Awesome.
Only if you give her a 5-star review, though. That comes with that.
Give me honest review. Give me honest review. Test my work.
Oh,
How
that's
about you,
awesome.
Dave? How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, and I'll put my email in there too, but you can find me on Instagram, Menapace_real estate. And then the 5-star co-host, all spelled out at gmail.com. I'll make sure to put it in there. Those are usually the two best ways to be able to reach me, and I'll throw my phone number in there. Seriously, people can shoot me a text. I could talk about this stuff for way more than 1 hour. So if anyone look or get some lunch or something, chat about.
All right, and since we
it.
have 1 more minute, I'm super curious, only because you guys are both real estate agents, and most of the people watching today, probably everybody here today, is for the most part a real estate agent. And it seems like there's lots of opportunity. Like, do you guys go out and, for example, like go around the lake that I stay on during the summer? There's so many properties that the people, it's like families have owned these generationally. Do you go out and say, hey, if you Airbnb this, you could go buy your next property? Like, do you guys build your businesses around that type of opportunity?
I was actually have that in mind for starting in Cape Cod. Now, a lot of people are not there in the off season, but it's easy to figure out where they live. So that's one of the ways I've been looking to build my co-hosting business or my hosting business. It's a good strategy though.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
I found that it's a lot for me is word of mouth, because I was born and raised in New Hampshire. I have a lot of friends whose parents or in-laws or whatever own property on Lake Winnipesaukee that's been in the family for years, and they're, you know, hesitant and they're not sure, and they have so many questions, and they're thinking about just renting it out for a couple of weeks, and they're asking me all these questions, and I need to start doing what Dave does and just start charging for these consulting services. Because I mean, even just, you know, renting it out a couple weekends a year, you can be super strict about your rules and how often you want to rent it, and just be very, very particular, but make additional income on a property that you already own. You know, just cover your mortgage. probably wouldn't take all that much. You just have to depersonalize and look at it from a renter's perspective.
Wow, great stuff. Our time is up today, but I took a bunch of notes throughout today's program. I think you guys covered so much in a very short amount of time. So Sarah and Dave, I want to say thank you for sharing all of your wisdom. Dave, I'll go check out your podcast to learn some more about buying Airbnb. So thank you so much, and wishing everybody a great weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.